The McAllister family lived in a charming two-story brick house nestled at the edge of Maplewood Lane, a peaceful suburban neighborhood where the loudest sounds were chirping birds and the occasional barking dog. It was early November, and a thin veil of frost had begun to settle on rooftops and lawns. Warmth inside the house was a blessing, a cozy comfort guarded by the gentle hum of the central heating system. But beneath that hum, something invisible and dangerous had begun to stir. At the heart of this home lived a peculiar and perceptive feline named Clover. She was a sleek, silver-gray tabby with piercing green eyes that always seemed to be watching, not in the aloof way most cats observe the world, but with intention, almost concern. She had been adopted from a shelter 2 years ago, shortly after the McAllisters moved in. Emma, the youngest of the 3 children, had chosen Clover for her soft purr and the way she instantly curled up in her lap. From day one, Clover had proven to be more than just a pet. She was a quiet guardian, a curious companion who always seemed to know more than she let on. That Thursday started like any other. The morning sunlight filtered in through the kitchen blinds, warming the floor where Clover liked to nap. Emma, now 10, was eating cereal at the table while her father, Tom, stood by the coffee maker scrolling through emails on his phone. Her mother, Rachel, bustled around, packing lunchboxes and reminding the older kids to grab their jackets. No one noticed Clover's ears twitching as she sat by the heating vent, her eyes wide, posture tense. The usual calm in her gaze was replaced with alertness, a subtle but jarring shift. That night, as the family settled in for dinner, Clover didn't join them under the table as she normally did. Instead, she paced along the hallway, occasionally stopping to paw at the wall near the furnace room. No one gave it much thought. Tom chuckled and said, "She's probably chasing dust bunnies again." But Clover wasn't chasing anything. She was warning them. The first real sign that something was wrong came later that evening. Emma, curled up in her bed with a book, felt her eyes growing unusually heavy. Her chest felt tight, and a dull ache formed behind her eyes. She thought she was just tired, maybe coming down with something. Downstairs, Rachel sat on the couch watching a movie, her eyelids fluttering. Tom had fallen asleep in his armchair, remote still in hand. Even the older siblings, teenagers typically glued to their devices, complained of headaches and retreated early to bed. Only Clover remained active. She darted from room to room, her usual soft purring replaced by persistent meowing. She leapt onto counters, knocked over cups, and scratched at doors. She even jumped onto Tom's lap, pawing at his chest, trying to stir him. He groaned and gently pushed her off, barely conscious. At midnight, the house was wrapped in an unnatural stillness. The kind of quiet that didn't soothe, it unsettled. Clover stood in the center of the living room, fur on end, tail lashing. Her eyes scanned the room, and with a low growl, she sprinted upstairs to Emma's room. Emma lay in bed, pale and barely awake. Her breathing was shallow, and when Clover leapt onto her chest and began to knead and yowl, her eyes fluttered open just slightly. "See, Clover?" she whispered. The cat cried louder, pawing at her face, then jumped off and ran to the door. She looked back, yowling again. With great effort, Emma sat up, her vision spinning. She didn't understand what was wrong, but Clover's urgency was undeniable. Stumbling out of bed, she followed the cat down the hall, past her siblings' closed doors, down the stairs, gripping the banister with trembling fingers. In the living room, the air felt thick. Emma coughed and leaned against the wall, swaying on her feet. Clover rubbed against her leg, then darted to the fireplace where the carbon monoxide leak had started from a cracked exhaust pipe, a defect in the furnace that had gone unnoticed during its last checkup. By some miracle of instinct or perhaps something deeper, Clover knocked over a heavy vase on the fireplace mantel, the loud crash shattering the eerie silence of the house. Tom stirred first, blinking groggily. His head pounded, his limbs numb. "What the?" Rachel sat upright with a gasp, coughing. "Tom, I feel weird?" Clover meowed frantically, circling Emma, who now sat slumped near the wall, breathing shallowly. Rachel rushed to her daughter, panic overtaking the fog in her head. "Emma." Tom stumbled to the thermostat. He looked at the furnace gauge, then saw something blinking red. "Rachel, it's the heater, something's wrong." "What do you mean?" I think it's carbon monoxide." Rachel's eyes widened. "The detector? We only have one, in the basement. It was too late to scold themselves. They needed air. Tom yanked open the front door. Rachel lifted Emma in her arms and ran into the night air, calling for the older kids as she screamed their names. One by one, groggy and confused, they staggered outside. Tom dialed 911 with shaking hands. The paramedics confirmed it minutes later. A dangerous carbon monoxide leak had been filling the house slowly, quietly. If they'd stayed asleep even an hour longer, they might not have woken up at all. As the McAllisters sat huddled in blankets in the ambulance, oxygen masks pressed to their faces, a small voice cut through the chaos. "Clover," Emma said, reaching out. The cat, wrapped in a soft towel and held by a paramedic, gave a soft, tired meow. Her eyes found Emma's, and for a moment, the fear melted into something warm. Something thankful. "She saved us," Rachel whispered. "That cat saved our lives." But the story was far from over. The leak had been discovered, yes, but the mystery of how Clover knew, and why she had acted so desperately, would only deepen in the days to come. Something else had happened in that house. Something more than instinct. The McAllister house was silent again, but not because of danger this time. The furnace had been shut off, the gas lines inspected, and technicians had spent hours sealing the cracked exhaust vent that had caused the leak. Every window had been thrown open for days, airing out the last wisps of poison from their home. The once cozy warmth was replaced by layers of blankets and portable heaters humming in every corner. But no one in the family minded the chill. They were alive, and they owed it to a 10-pound cat who still prowled the halls, her green eyes watchful, her tail curling anxiously around her feet whenever someone sat too still. Emma had barely left Clover's side since the night of the leak. She'd carried the cat in her arms like a teddy bear, even when sleeping. She knew, she'd whispered to her mom one morning, eyes wide with wonder. She knew something was wrong. Rachel didn't argue. None of them did. It wasn't just Clover's timing or the frantic behavior that had saved them, it was how precise it had all been. She hadn't just acted out randomly. She'd targeted Emma first, the youngest and most vulnerable. She'd drawn attention to the fireplace, the exact location of the leak. She'd woken the family with deliberate, escalating efforts, and it had worked. It haunted Tom, honestly. Not just the what-ifs, but how it had all unfolded. How did she know? He asked Rachel late one night as they lay in bed, both of them sleepless. There were no alarms, no smell, nothing. Rachel stared at the ceiling, eyes glazed. "I don't know. Instinct, maybe. Or something more. They'd taken Clover to the vet just to be safe, worried the gas might have harmed her, too. But Dr. Keenan had pronounced her perfectly healthy. She's in great shape. Her heart rate was a little elevated when you brought her in, but that's expected after a trauma like that. Honestly, she's a marvel." "She's more than that," Emma said quietly from the bench seat, hugging Clover to her chest. "She's a hero." News of the cat's life-saving act had spread. A local reporter wrote a short article about Clover the guardian cat, and neighbors brought over treats, toys, and a handmade blanket embroidered with Clover's name. But while the neighborhood buzzed with admiration, Clover remained oddly restless. She didn't settle. She barely napped. She paced more than she ever had before. The only time she seemed calm was when she was sitting on the windowsill in the living room, staring at the fireplace. It had been patched and inspected, declared completely safe. But Clover didn't seem convinced. That Saturday night, a week after the leak, Emma sat on the couch with Clover curled in her lap. She was stroking her fur gently, humming a quiet tune. Tom was upstairs finishing the laundry, and Rachel was flipping through a photo album on the other couch, occasionally smiling at old snapshots. "You were so tiny," she murmured, pointing to a picture of Emma as a toddler, reaching toward a kitten in a pet store window. "That wasn't even Clover, remember?" Emma nodded. "That one scratched me. But Clover didn't." "No, Clover came a year later. After we moved here." Rachel flipped another page and frowned. "You know, I don't think we ever figured out how Clover ended up at that shelter." Emma blinked. "We didn't?" Rachel shook her head. "She was dropped off without papers. No microchip. Just a collar with no tag. The woman at the desk said she seemed like she had belonged to someone before, was trained, gentle. She always kind of felt like she had a story." Emma looked down at Clover, now asleep, breathing slow and deep. What if, Emma said suddenly, she came to find us on purpose? Rachel raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She acts like she knows us. Like she's supposed to be here. And maybe, she hesitated, cheeks pink. Maybe she was meant to save us. Rachel's smile was gentle. That's a beautiful thought, honey. But something about it clung to her for the rest of the night. The next morning, Clover did something new. While the family ate breakfast, she began pawing at the closet door under the stairs. At first, no one noticed, until she meowed loudly, scratching at the bottom with unusual urgency. Clover? Rachel walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. What are you doing? She opened the closet slowly. It was mostly coats, cleaning supplies, and the vacuum. But Clover pushed past her feet and leapt inside, disappearing behind a pile of old shoes. Hey, careful in there. A second later, Rachel heard something, a soft thump, followed by a strange metallic rattle. She knelt, pushing aside the shoes. There, tucked behind the vacuum, was an old carbon monoxide detector. It was dusty and dead, the battery long drained. Tom appeared at the sound. What's going on? She just found this, Rachel said, holding up the unit. Tom's face turned pale. That was our first detector. I thought I'd tossed it. Clover let out a soft, pointed meow. Rachel stared at the unit. If this was our only one last winter, and it didn't work. That leak might have been going on before we even knew, Tom said slowly. They looked down at Clover, who sat in the corner of the closet, tail curled around her paws. Rachel whispered, she found the one thing we missed. That day, Tom installed new carbon monoxide detectors in every room, upstairs and down. Rachel insisted they add smoke alarms too. She even set up a pet camera to keep an eye on Clover while they were out. The unease hadn't left her, not because she didn't feel safe now, but because she was starting to wonder if Clover had been aware of the danger long before it came to a head. Over the next few days, Emma began recording her cat's strange behavior. Clover still stared at corners, meowed into empty rooms, and sometimes growled at seemingly nothing. One night, she pawed at Emma's door until she woke up, then ran to the window and scratched at it. Emma followed her and peered outside. There, parked across the street, was a van she didn't recognize. No lights on, no movement, but when she blinked, it was gone. Clover purred once and returned to bed. Emma didn't sleep the rest of the night. A pattern was forming, strange and uncanny. Clover didn't just detect gas. She knew when something was wrong. And one evening, while Emma was brushing Clover and humming to herself, she felt something stir in her chest, not fear, but a quiet realization. Mom? She called. Do you think animals can hear things we can't? Rachel looked up from her book. Like high-pitched noises? No, Emma said. Like voices. Warnings. From something else. Rachel frowned, then slowly walked over and sat beside her daughter. What kind of voices? I don't know, Emma said, stroking Clover's soft fur. But I think Clover does. As she spoke, Clover looked up, her eyes locking onto Emma's with eerie focus. For a brief moment, her tail stopped twitching. Her gaze wasn't just feline, it was human in its intensity. It said, yes, I hear them, and soon, they'd all hear something too. Because what happened with the gas leak wasn't the end of Clover's story. It was only the beginning. The McAllisters never returned to life as usual. Not fully. After the carbon monoxide incident, everything had changed, not just in their house, but in their minds. There was a quietness now, the kind that lingered in the hallways and clung to the edges of their routines. The family had grown closer, more careful. They laughed more softly, hugged more often, and watched Clover with something like reverence. Because deep down, they knew, without her, they wouldn't be here. It had been 3 weeks since the night Clover shattered a vase and saved 5 lives. 3 weeks since Emma stumbled downstairs, guided by her cat's cries, and woke her parents just in time. The furnace had been fixed. New detectors blinked quietly in every room. The windows no longer fogged with frost, and warmth had returned. But something else returned, too. It started subtly. The heater had been checked thoroughly, multiple times. Yet strange clicking sounds sometimes echoed through the vents at night. Tom chalked it up to old pipes. But the sound wasn't metallic. It was rhythmic, deliberate, almost like tapping. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Rachel found Clover standing in the middle of the living room, completely still. Her ears were back. Her eyes were locked on the fireplace. "Clover?" Rachel whispered, approaching slowly. The cat hissed. Not at her, but at the wall. Rachel's breath caught. She looked at the fireplace, heart thudding. The brick was clean, the patchwork over the exhaust pipe invisible beneath the new finish. And yet, the air smelled faintly metallic. Not like gas. Something else. Behind her, Clover growled, a low, throaty sound Rachel had never heard before. The next day, they called the technician back again. He ran a full inspection, even dismantled part of the wall to double-check the gas lines. "Everything looks great," he said. "Honestly, your cat probably has post-trauma behavior. Animals can get that way after events like this. Overly protective. They're more sensitive than we are." Rachel nodded, but his words rang hollow. That night, Emma had another dream. She stood in her bedroom, surrounded by silence. But when she turned, Clover was there, sitting upright on the windowsill, bathed in moonlight. And then she spoke. Not with words. Not really. But Emma understood her. "It's not just gas. It came through the pipes, but it wasn't just air." Emma woke with a gasp, heart racing. Clover was curled on her chest, staring at her. Wide-eyed. Awake. A deep cold hung in the room, despite the heater running. The next morning, Emma found something odd in the basement. A pile of dust near the vent, as though something had been disturbed. The pipes were warm, the floor untouched. But the smell was back. That same metallic tinge. It didn't come from the furnace. It came from behind it. Emma called for her dad, and Tom came down with a flashlight. He crouched behind the unit, shining light through the shadows. "What is that?" he murmured. There, half hidden behind an old panel, was a small object, a blackened square no larger than a coaster. It was bolted to the floor, wires frayed around its base. It looked like a sensor, but not one he had installed. They called the gas company. The technician took one look and frowned. "This isn't ours. It's not part of your heating system." "Then what is it?" Tom asked. The man scratched his head. "Looks like some kind of external sensor. Industrial grade, maybe used in testing or surveillance." Rachel paled. "Why would someone put that in our house?" The technician shrugged. "No clue, but I'd get your entire system swept. Just to be safe." It was a chilling discovery. Someone, or something, had installed foreign equipment in their home. And it had failed, possibly causing the leak. They filed a police report, but nothing came of it. No fingerprints, no security footage, nothing was stolen. Just a strange device left behind, wired into their furnace system like it was meant to listen or monitor, or worse. It was Emma who finally said what they were all thinking. Maybe the leak wasn't an accident. From that point forward, things changed again. They installed security cameras. Tom changed the locks. But none of it felt like enough. Because if something had been watching them, listening, why? Why them? The only one who seemed to know was Clover. And she never stopped watching. One evening, as snow fell softly outside and the family curled up in the living room to watch a movie, Clover leapt from the windowsill and pawed at the TV remote, switching the input by accident, or on purpose. The screen flickered, then froze. It wasn't their movie. It was footage. Grainy, black and white. A faint outline of a room. A camera mounted somewhere low, near the floor. Shapes moved across the screen, faint outlines of people. It was their living room. Tom lunged for the remote and shut off the power. "What the hell was that?" Rachel whispered. "I don't know," he said hoarsely. "That input shouldn't exist." The next morning, the entire family agreed, they were moving. Within a week, the McAllisters packed up. Emma cried when she left her room for the last time, Clover purring tightly against her chest. But deep down, even Emma knew. This house had seen something, held something, that didn't want to let them go. They moved across town into a smaller, brighter house with brand new everything. The detectors beeped clearly. The furnace was pristine, and Clover was finally at peace. She no longer paced at night. No more staring at vents. No more growling at shadows. But she still listened. She'd sit on the windowsill for hours, ears flicking, eyes scanning. And sometimes, when Emma watched her closely, she could almost see it again, that strange intelligence behind her feline gaze. "Do you still hear it?" Emma asked one night, brushing Clover's fur. The cat blinked slowly and turned to her. And in that moment, in the hush of a warm room filled with quiet gratitude, Emma didn't need a meow to understand the answer. Yes, but not here, not anymore. Epilogue. The old house on Maplewood Lane remained empty for months before a new family moved in. The carbon monoxide leak never returned. The strange clicking in the vents never happened again. But the very first night the new owners moved in, their dog, a massive, normally fearless retriever, refused to enter the basement. He stood at the top of the stairs, ears flat, growling into the darkness. And downstairs, behind the furnace, a tiny red light blinked once. Then went out.